Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about why I don't like Smith machines, why I don't advocate their use, and why I think they're actually harmful, because this came up the other day in my video comments. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Because, I had someone say, I can see why you might not like them on deadlifts, but things like squats, bench press, overhead press, those are just a straight line, right? So they should be fine. And the reality is that's simply not true. That's not true. These are not straight line exercises. There is a bar path involved. And what people need to understand is that it would be, for you to even find the right positions on a Smith machine is very, very difficult. In other words, keeping proper balance over your body in the way that your body is meant to be loaded is actually hard with a Smith machine. Because, for example, on a squat, which is a perfectly safe movement, people need to understand that a full range of motion squat doesn't cause injuries unless usually you're going so insanely heavy that it becomes a problem for you. So we're not talking about competing at elite levels in powerlifting. I'm talking about the average gym goer. And I'm talking about weights, for women in the 200-pound range, weights for men in the 400-pound range. If you build these gradually, this is actually a perfectly safe exercise if you build up the strength over months and years to get there. In other words, small gradual loading using good technique. It's a normal basic movement pattern. Squatting is actually a perfectly normal action for human beings for tens of thousands of years. We're actually well made for it. It's just that due to some of our modern lifestyle, we lose some of the mobility and things that we really need to squat. But all over the world, just squatting and resting in third world countries is common. It's extremely common. It's a perfectly normal movement pattern. But to do it correctly is to actually go low all the way down and to keep the weight mid-foot, right? And there is a balancing act involved in it. And when you put yourself in the Smith machine, guess what? You lock yourself into a fixed bar path. You are more likely to injure your back or to injure your knees, right? Because of the bar path that you have created. So the reality is, you see a lot of people who will talk about how they hurt their knees squatting. Well, if they hurt their knees with a normal barbell squatting, 9 times out of 10, that person is a half squatter. And I've covered that in detail in the past as to why half squats are actually bad for your knees. They're way worse for your knees than doing an actual squat to parallel or just below. Dramatically worse for your knees. Smith machines tend to do the same thing. They put you into positions that put more shear on your knee than's ideal. Because again, you're letting the bar drift in some direction other than being mid-foot. And what you need to remember is that keeping it mid-foot requires some movement of the torso on the way up and down also. Again, you're just locking yourself into an unnatural position. Furthermore, they're not even safe. It's much easier in a power rack to have safety set up that'll catch it. And people say, well, the Smith machines, you can just turn the handles. Yeah, what if you fail to turn the handles? And you've actually got to turn the handles under load with a really heavy weight. And when you're pinned, by the time you get those handles turned, you've already hurt yourself half the time. It's an extremely unsafe device. Extremely unsafe. Furthermore, again, it doesn't even build the same strength and size that you would get with just a normal barbell there. Another perfect one that I think it's really, really dangerous on is overhead pressing. I am already not a fan of seated overhead pressing, and you guys know that. But what happens, you see this all the time. You will see guys who come over to the Smith machine and they will do seated presses. What's the problem with that? Well, they're fixed in a fixed path. An actual overhead press does have a curve to it. Because how do you protect your shoulder joint? When people talk about hurting your shoulder joints while doing an overhead press, they talk about rotator cuff injuries. That's usually because the bar is too far forward, right? And people lock out like this. Whereas if you do it correctly standing, you can pull your head back, bring your chest up, you can touch your chest, drive up, and then push your head forward and push through. And your whole torso moves, and the bar still goes up, but your torso moves. When you're seated and locked into a Smith machine, you have no way usually to move your head and torso back and forth correctly. And because you're locked into that track, the bar starts way out in front of you. So when you lock out, you're up here. See where I'm going with this? This is what puts that shear on the rotator cuff. This is what damages you. This is what hurts you. So doing overhead pressing in a Smith machine actually exacerbates all the physiology concerns that anyone has with the overhead press. It actually completely eliminates the ability to use the safest bar path that is very, very unlikely to hurt you. To use the bar path that cannot cause shoulder impingement cannot be done in a Smith machine. You can't actually use the bar path that prevents shoulder impingement on this exercise. So this is really a problem. This is really a big problem. Now the same thing when we get into a bench press. Bench press is not a straight up and down line. There is an actual arc to the bench press. There is actually a Z or an S shape to a properly performed bench press. You get locked into the Smith machine, and it's a problem. Furthermore, even though people argue about the bench press being dangerous and it can be performed incorrectly, there have been documented cases of people being killed benching in the Smith machine. Perfect example. There's someone who has a YouTube channel, is actually a well-known coach out there, a guy by the name of Matt Reynolds. He actually runs Barbell Logic. And he's a strength and conditioning coach and power lifter and former strongman, all of this stuff. His cousin died benching in a Smith machine. So what it comes down to is it's just not a safe device. It's not good. They're not useful. And, people will say certain things like, well, they're good for maybe doing shrugs in. But it's like, in what world do you have problems doing shrugs? What world do you have problems doing shrugs? You pick up a barbell and you shrug. That's usually the only justification people have is calf raises or shrugs. A lot of other ways to train your calves. You can train your calves in a standard squat rack also. You could just set pins up high, get under the bar, just like you would do an ultra high pin squat, and do calf raises. If you needed to do that, why do you need a Smith machine for this? Same thing with a shrug. Is a shrug that hard to do? Yeah, you could argue that the shrug might be an exercise that you could do just as effectively in a Smith machine. Is it really that hard to find a barbell to pick up? Can't you just shrug off of blocks? Couldn't you just pick it up in a power rack or squat rack and shrug it if it was too heavy for you to deadlift up? Not really a problem. And you know what? The funny thing for me on that is when I did used to do shrugs many, many years ago, I never used anything but a barbell. I just deadlifted it up and did shrugs with it. It's not that hard. So you've got to wonder when people come up with these handful of exercises that they justify the Smith machine for, they're actually exercises that you could very simply do with just a barbell or a barbell and a rack. So there's no actual advantage to the Smith machine. Again, unnecessary piece of equipment. Serves no real benefit. It has no benefits or perks to ever using it. And it only has risk of injury and not getting strong because you're not learning exercises correctly. There's actually no advantage whatsoever to it at all. It's one of those devices that I think should have never been invented, and I really don't see a need for it in any gym. I really don't. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.